Caleb Rourke heard the scream before he saw her, and it cut through the Kansas heat like a knife. When he crested the low ridge outside Dodge City, the prairie opened into a little cottonwood grove, and a young woman was hanging upside down from a thick limb. Ankles bound with rope, wrists tied behind her back, her dress had fallen to her waist, dust stuck to her white underthings, and she was screaming at the empty sky as if it could blush for her. Caleb stopped so hard his horse snorted. For 2 full heartbeats he just stared, frozen completely. By the sudden, shameless view he had not seen since his wife died 8 summers ago, the girl saw his eyes drop, and shame hit her like wildfire. "Don't look down there. That's off limits," she snapped, voice cracking. Caleb blinked, jaw tightening, and forced his gaze to her face. She looked about 22, freckled, sunburned, and furious that her rescue had witnessed her humiliation. He swung down, boots thudding into dry grass, and pulled his knife. The rope was rough cowboy work, tied fast, meant to hurt. Caleb cut the knot, but he did not drop her. He caught her hips with one arm, steady as a fence post, then lowered her to the ground with slow care. She stumbled, grabbed the fallen skirt and yanked it down as if cloth could erase what he had seen. Behind her, deep hoof prints and dragged grass showed a struggle. Someone had played with her out here, far from town. A shadow moved between the trees. A man stepped out wearing a deputy's star that flashed too bright in the sun. Silas Crow smiled like he owned the air Maggie breathed. "She's under arrest, he said, holding up a folded paper. "By order of Dodge City." Maggie flinched. Caleb read the ink from where he stood, and his stomach turned. It was a warrant, but the name on it was wrong, the dates smeared, and the signature looked like a drunk man's scratch. Caleb felt Maggie trembling beside him. He also felt something darker, a rising rage at how easily a badge could become a weapon. Silas leaned closer and lowered his voice. "You saw too much, rancher," he whispered. "Now you either hand her over, or you ride back to your lonely house and keep your mouth shut." Caleb looked at Maggie. Her eyes were wet, but they were not begging. They were daring him to be decent. He could take her to town, find the real sheriff, and try to win by law, or he could settle it right here, where no one would see what he did next. If Caleb breaks the rules to save her, will Dodge City call him hero or hang him? Caleb did not move when Silas Crow finished speaking. The prairie went quiet, and that way it does right before trouble starts, when even the wind seems to listen. Maggie stood close enough that Caleb could feel her shaking, and that alone told him more than any warrant ever could. He glanced at the paper again, slow and deliberate, like an old man reading a fence line. "Funny thing," Caleb said calmly, almost friendly. "I've been riding this county for 20 years, and I've never seen a lawful arrest start with a girl tied upside down." Silas smiled wider. "It's called resisting," he said. "She ran. I caught her." Maggie let out a short laugh that was half anger and half disbelief. "I tripped," she said. "He tied me up to teach me a lesson." Silas turned his eyes on her, sharp and cold. "Careful, girl," he warned. "Talking like that can make things worse." Caleb felt something twist in his chest. It was not rage yet. It was that heavy feeling a man gets when he realizes he has let the world push him around for too long. He remembered his wife, gone 8 summers now, and how quiet his house had been since. He remembered how easy it had been to mind his own business, to ride past trouble instead of through it. Silas stepped closer, close enough that Caleb could smell sweat and cheap tobacco. "You can still walk away," Silas said softly. "Take your horse, take your pride, and leave her to the law." Caleb looked at Maggie again. Her dress was torn at the hem, dust on her knees, hair tangled from the rope. Yet she stood straight, chin up, eyes daring Silas to touch her again. Caleb chuckled under his breath. "Ma'am," he said to Maggie, "you always get arrested like this." She snorted despite herself. "Only on days ending in Y." Silas scowled. "Enough," he snapped. He reached for Maggie's arm. Caleb moved faster than he had in years. He stepped between them, one hand out. Not striking, just stopping. Silas froze, his fingers inches from her sleeve. "Don't," Caleb said quietly. The word carried weight. Silas glanced down at Caleb's hand, then back up at his face. You put hands on an officer, Silas said, voice tight. That's prison, rancher. Caleb nodded. Maybe, he said, or maybe it's the last mistake you ever make. The smile vanished from Silas's face. In its place was something dangerous, something mean. He shifted his stance and slid his hand toward his gun. And that was the moment when everything stopped being about law and started being about survival. Was Caleb about to cross a line he could never step back from? Silas's hand hovered near his gun like it had a mind of its own. Caleb kept his voice low. The way you talk to a nervous horse. You reach for iron, deputy, and somebody's going to get buried out here, he said. Silas gave a dry laugh. That's a threat, rancher. Caleb shrugged. It's a prediction. Maggie swallowed hard behind him. Caleb could hear her breathing, quick and shallow, and he hated that she had to learn fear like this. Silas took one step to the side, trying to get a clear line on Caleb's hip where his own pistol sat. Caleb matched him, staying between Silas and Maggie, like a gate that wouldn't open. Silas's eyes flicked down again. Then he did a sneaky little move, the kind men do when they think they're smarter than everyone else. He let the warrant paper fall, like it slipped from his fingers by accident. When Caleb's eyes dropped for a split second, Silas lunged, not with the gun. With his shoulder, he slammed into Caleb's chest and tried to drive him backward into Maggie. Dust jumped off the dry grass, and Caleb stumbled one step, boots skidding. And then old ranch strength took over. Caleb planted his heels and shoved back, hard. Silas lost balance and his hat flew off, spinning like a bad joke. Maggie gasped, then kicked Silas's fallen hat away without thinking. It rolled into a prickly patch of weeds. Caleb almost smiled at that. Even with his heart pounding, Silas saw it, and his face turned red. You little witch, he snapped at Maggie. He swung his arm toward her, not a fist, more like a slap meant to put her in her place. Caleb caught Silas's wrist midair. The grip was tight, not cruel, just final. Silas tried to jerk free. Caleb held on. Silas's other hand shot down toward his gun. That was the real move. That was the one that meant death. Caleb reacted without thinking. He twisted Silas's wrist inward, sharp and fast, and Silas grunted like a hog hitting a fence. The deputy's fingers opened. His gun stayed in the holster, but the message was clear. Caleb could stop him. Silas pulled back, eyes wide now, and for the first time he looked unsure. Then he smiled again, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a man who knew exactly how to ruin your life in court. You just put hands on the law, Silas said, and I'm going to make you pay for it in Dodge City. Maggie stepped up beside Caleb, voice steadier than her hands. He's not the law, she said. He's a bully with a star. Caleb stared at Silas and realized something. This deputy didn't come alone. Men like him never do. Somewhere close, hidden in the trees or the tall grass, there would be another set of eyes, maybe another gun. So if you're enjoying this story so far, go ahead and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you'd think. Now grab a cup of tea, settle in with me, and tell me what time it is where you are and where you're listening from. Because in the next breath, a gunshot turns this rescue into a manhunt. Because Caleb was about to find out who else was watching when a rifle cocked behind the cottonwoods. The rifle click came again, closer this time, and Caleb knew it was not his imagination. Silas lifted his chin, smug as a man holding a winning card. Easy now, Silas said. You don't want to make this ugly. Caleb slowly raised one hand, palm out, but he did not step away from Maggie. Who's back there? Caleb asked, calm on the surface, tight underneath. A voice answered from the cottonwoods, rough and amused. Just keeping things fair. A man stepped out with a long rifle resting easy on his shoulder. He was lean, sunburned, and smiling like this was entertainment. Silas nodded at him. That's my witness, Silas said. Sees everything, remembers things real clear when a judge asks. Maggie's fingers dug into Caleb's sleeve. Caleb could feel her fear again, sharp and hot. He leaned his head just enough to whisper, When I say move, you run, he said. Don't look back. Maggie shook her head. I'm not leaving you, she whispered. Caleb smiled a little at that. Even now. Silas cleared his throat. Enough romance, he said. Hands behind your back. Rancher. Caleb did not comply. Instead, he took a slow step forward. Silas's eyes widened. The rifleman shifted his stance. Time stretched thin. Then Maggie screamed, not in fear, but in warning. The rifleman had slipped his finger inside the trigger guard. Caleb reacted. He lunged sideways, grabbing Maggie and dragging her down as a shot cracked the air. Wood splintered above them. Birds exploded from the trees. Caleb rolled, came up on one knee, and his hand went to his pistol. He hadn't even thought about it. His body just knew. A shot cracked, sharp and close, and the rifleman screamed. The bullet hit his hand, and he dropped the rifle like it burned him. The .44 barked once. His hand turned red, and the rifle hit the dirt before he did. He clutched his wrist, stumbled backward, then vanished into the brush, scared out of his mind. Silas froze for a heartbeat. Nobody moved. Then a sound rolled in from the open prairie. Hooves, more than one horse, coming hard. Silas's smile twitched, like even he didn't like that timing. Caleb kept his eyes on him. Your boys heard the shots, didn't they? Caleb said. Silas didn't answer, but his eyes flicked toward the sound. That was answer enough. Caleb grabbed Silas, drove him down into the dirt, and pinned him there. He yanked the badge free and crushed the tin star in his fist. Then he tossed it into the weeds. Then Caleb leaned close, voice like gravel. Tell them the truth in town, or I'll tell it for you. Caleb stood up fast and turned to Maggie. Up, now, he said. Maggie didn't argue. They scrambled onto the horse, Maggie gripping Caleb tight. Behind them, the hoofbeats grew louder, and angry voices carried on the wind. Caleb dug his heels in, and the horse surged forward. They didn't stop until they saw the first buildings of Dodge City ahead. The dust behind them kept rising like a storm that had learned their names. Maggie leaned close, her voice small now. Caleb, what if they catch us before we reach town? Caleb didn't look back. He just kept the horse steady. Then we don't let them take you, he said. Maggie swallowed, and her fingers tightened on his belt. I never even told you my name, she said. Caleb's mouth twitched like he almost forgot how to smile. Maggie, he said. I heard Silas say it. Then his face went hard again. I haven't felt this awake since the day they put Sarah in the ground. He said it plain, like truth didn't need decoration. Caleb didn't slow down, not until they were close enough to see people turning their heads. Caleb sat high in the saddle, chest heaving, staring ahead at Dodge City. It felt strange, like ripping a thorn out of your own hand and realizing it had been there for years. Maggie pressed closer behind him, still shaking, and Caleb did the one thing he should have done from the start. Caleb tugged his coat tighter around her shoulders, making sure it covered her. Not like a hero, like a man who finally remembered how to be decent. Thank you, she said, quieter now. Caleb nodded, then looked toward Dodge City, where that distant bell had rung like a warning. We can't stay out here, he said. If we do, he turns us into a story people tell wrong. Still in the saddle, Maggie held his belt tight, because the ground was rough and her nerves were worse. Every mile toward town, Caleb felt the weight of what he had done. He had fought a deputy, he had fired his pistol, he had chosen a person over peace, and for a widower who had lived careful and quiet, that choice was louder than any gunshot. At the edge of Dodge City, Caleb slowed. A couple of men on a porch stopped chewing and stared. One of them spit into the dust and squinted at Maggie's torn dress. Caleb raised a hand, not friendly, not rude, just asking for space. A wagon rolled by, slow as a funeral, and a woman inside pulled her kid closer. Maggie lowered her eyes, shame trying to crawl back onto her like a blanket. Caleb shifted in the saddle and angled his body, blocking her from their stares. He spoke low. Only for her. Keep your chin up. You didn't do wrong. Maggie breathed out and nodded once. Then a man near the hitching rail muttered, "That deputy again." Caleb's eyes snapped to him. He asked, "Where's the sheriff?" He could see men on the street, the porch shadows, the way folks watched newcomers like they were guests in trouble from a distance. Maggie leaned in. "Do you think they'll believe us?" she asked. Caleb breathed out. "I don't know," he said, "but I know what happens when good people keep walking away." He'd seen it before, on lonely stretches of trail and in small towns that pretended nothing was happening. A bully gets brave, a decent man gets tired, and the first time a bad badge wins, everybody learns to look away. Maggie's voice shook, but she pushed it out anyway. "If they don't believe me, I'm finished," she said. Caleb turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. "Then we make them believe," he said. "And if they still won't, I'll stand beside you anyway." That was the real fight, not the dust and fists back in the cottonwoods. The real fight was deciding who you are when it would be easier to stay quiet. Caleb had been quiet for 8 summers. He had told himself it was strength. But standing up for Maggie showed him the truth. Sometimes quiet is just fear wearing a polite shirt. If you've ever had a moment where you knew something was wrong, but you stayed silent to keep life simple, this part is for you. What would you do if the law looked official, but your gut told you it was rotten? Would you still stand there and smile, or would you risk being the one who makes it right? Caleb looked at Maggie, and she looked back at him, and there was something new in her eyes now. Not just gratitude, trust. And maybe the first spark of love, the kind that shows up when 2 people survive the same storm. They rode into town to face whatever waited, not because they were fearless, but because they were done being pushed. If this story's hitting you somewhere real, tap like. It helps more than you think. And if you want more true-feeling frontier tales like this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Now here's the question I want to leave you with. When Caleb walks into Dodge City and tells the truth, will the town protect him, or will the town protect the badge that tried to destroy a young woman?